Hello tech lovers! This is a complete training about the similarities, the difference, and the principal aspects about OFDMA and SC-FDMA. And look, no other free tutorial is so complete, because here we're going to explore these techniques to know how they work, why do we need them, the architecture, the advantages, and many more. But first, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, activate the bell to be notified when I upload a new video, like, share, and leave your opinion in the comments below. It helps me a lot. Join our group on Facebook, the link in the description. The technique that we use for radio transmission and reception in LTE is known as Orthogonal Frequency Division Multiple Access, or OFDMA. OFDMA carries out the same functions as any other multiple access techniques by allowing the base station to communicate with several different mobiles at the same time. However, it is also a powerful way to minimize the problems of fading and inter-symbol interference that we introduced in the previous videos. Link in the description and up here in the card. But in this tutorial, we're gonna describe the basic principles of OFDMA and show how it is applied to a mobile cellular network. We will also cover a modified radio transmission technique known as Single Carrier Frequency Division Multiple Access, or SC-FDMA, which is used in LTE for uplink. We will explain this later in the video. OFDMA is also used by several other radio communication systems, such as wireless local areas, WiMAX, digital television, and radio broadcasting. Orthogonal Frequency Division Multiplexing, or better, OFDM, is a powerful way to solve the problem. Instead of sending the information as a single stream, an OFDM transmitter divides the information into several parallel substreams, and sends each substream on a different frequency known as subcarrier. But if the total data rate stays the same, then the data rate on each subcarrier is less than before, so the symbol duration is longer. This reduces the amount of ISI and error rate. The OFDM transmitter. As we can see in this block diagram, we represent here an analog OFDM transmitter. This diagram contains some specifications that we will deal with shortly, but it serves to illustrate the basic principles of the technique. The transmitter accepts the stream of bits from higher layer protocols and converts them to symbols using the chosen modulation scheme. For example, the Quadrature Phase Shift Keying, QPSK, OFDMA in a mobile cellular network, mobile access. In this figure, as you can see, the base stations transmitted to 3 mobiles at the same time using orthogonal frequency division multiplexing. We can take this idea a step further by sharing the resources dynamically amongst all the mobiles in the cell. The resulting technique is known as Orthogonal Frequency Division Multiple Access, OFDMA, and is illustrated here in this figure. In OFDMA, the base station shares the resources by transmitting to the mobiles at different times and frequencies. You can see in this example here, Mobile 1 is receiving a voice over IP stream, and hence the number of subcarriers is low but constant. On the other hand, Mobile 2 is receiving a stream of non-real-time packet data. The average data rate is higher, but the data come in bursts, so the number of subcarriers can vary. The base station can also respond to frequency-dependent fading by allocating subcarriers on which the mobile is receiving a strong signal. You can look in the figure. The mobile tree is receiving a VoIP stream, voice over IP stream, but it is also affected by frequency-dependent fading. In response, the base station allocates subcarriers on which the mobile is receiving a strong signal and changes this allocation as the fading pattern changes. In a similar way, it can transmit to mobile 4 using separate blocks of subcarriers which are separated by a fade. By allocating subcarriers in response to changes in the fading patterns, an OFDMA transmitter can greatly reduce the impact of time and frequency-dependent fading. Fractional frequency reuse. Using the techniques described above, one base station can send information to a large number of mobiles. However, a mobile communication system also has a large number of base stations, so every mobile has to receive a signal from one base station in the presence of interference from the others. Look, we need a way to minimize the interference, so the mobile can receive the information successfully. Previous systems used two different techniques. For example, in GSM, nearby cells transmit using different carrier frequencies. Typically, each cell might use a quarter of the total bandwidth, with a reuse factor of 25%. This technique reduces the interference between nearby cells, but it means that the frequency band is used with no efficiency. In UMTS, the third generation, each cell has the same carrier frequency, with a reuse factor of 100%. This technique uses the frequency band more efficiently than before, but at the expense of increasing interference in the system. In NLT network, every base station can transmit in the same frequency band. However, it can allocate the subcarriers within that band in a flexible way, using a technique known as fractional frequency reuse that can give the best of both worlds. In this figure, you can see a simple example in which every base station is controlling one cell and every cell is sharing the same frequency band. Within that band, each cell transmits to nearby mobiles using the same set of subcarriers, denoted FO or FCO. This works well because the mobiles are close to their respective base stations, so the received signals are strong enough to overwhelm any interference. Distant mobiles receive much weaker signals, which are easily damaged by interference. To avoid this, neighboring cells can transmit to those mobiles using different sets of subcarriers. In this example shown here, half the frequency band is recovered by nearby mobiles, while the remainder is divided into three sets, F1, F2, and F3, for use by distant mobiles. The resulting reuse factor is 67%. More flexible implementations are possible. For example, one cell might use a set of subcarriers for distant mobiles, while its neighbors use the same set for nearby mobiles. Cyclic prefix insertion. Earlier in the video, we saw how OFDMA reduces the amount of inter-symbol interference by transmitting data on multiple subcarriers. A final technique allows us to get rid of ISI altogether. The basic idea is to insert a guard period, GP, before each symbol, in which nothing is transmitted. If the guard period is longer than the delay period, then the receiver can be confident of reading the information from just one symbol at a time, without any overlap with the symbols that precede or follow. Naturally, the symbol reaches the receiver at different times on different rays, and same extra processing is required to tidy up the confusion. The extra processing is relatively straightforward. However, LTE uses slightly more complex technique known as cyclic prefix, cyclic prefix insertion, as you can see in this figure. Here, the transmitter starts by inserting a guard period before each symbol as before. However, it then copies the data from the end of the symbol following, so LTE uses a slightly more complex technique known as cyclic prefix insertion. Here, the transmitter starts by inserting a guard period before each symbol, as before. However, it then copies the data from the end of the symbol following, so as to fill up the guard period. If the cyclic prefix is longer than the delay period, then the receiver can still be confident of reading information from just one symbol at a time. We can see how cyclic prefix insertion works by looking at one subcarrier as shown in this figure. The transmitted signal is a sine wave, whose amplitude and phase change from one symbol to the next. As noted earlier in the video, each symbol contains an exact number of cycles of the sine wave, so the amplitude and phase at the start of each symbol equal the amplitude and phase at the end. And because of this, the transmitted signal changes smoothly as we move from each cyclic prefix to the symbol following. The received signal still changes smoothly at the transition from a cyclic prefix to the symbol that follows. The receiver processes the received signal with a window whose length equals the symbol duration, and discards the remainder. If the window is correctly placed, then the received signal is exactly what was transmitted, without any glitches and subject only to an amplitude change and phase shift. The system uses multiple subcarriers, not just one. However, we have already seen that subcarriers do not interfere with each other and can be treated independently. So, the existence of multiple subcarriers does not affect this argument at all. Single carrier frequency division multiple access. Power variations from OFDMA. OFDMA works well on the LTE downlink. However, it has one disadvantage. The power of the transmitted signal is subject to rather large variations. To illustrate this, the figure beside shows a set of subcarriers that have been modulated using QPSK and which therefore have constant power. The amplitude of resulting signal, as you can see beside, varies widely, where the peaks of the subcarriers coincide, and zeros where they cancel. In turn, these variations are reflected in the power of the transmitted signal, as you can see in this other figure. These power variations can cause problems for the transmitter's power amplifier. If the amplifier is linear, then the output power is proportional to the input, so the output waveform is exactly the shape that we require. if the amplifier is nonlinear, then the output power is no longer proportional to the input, so the output waveform is distorted. Any distortion of the time domain waveform will distort the frequency domain power spectrum as well. So the signal will leak into adjacent frequency bands and will cause interference to the other devices. But in the downlink, the base station transmitters are large, expensive devices, so they can avoid the problem by using expensive power amplifiers that are very close to linear. In the uplink, a mobile transmitter has to be cheap, so it doesn't have this option. This is why OFDMA is unsuitable for the LTE uplink. Block diagram of SC-FDMA. The power variations described above arise because there is a one-to-one mapping between symbols and subcarriers. If we mix the symbols together before placing them on the subcarriers, then we might be able to adjust the transmitted signal and reduce its power variation. For example, when transmitting two symbols x1 and x2 on two subcarriers, we might send their sum, x1 plus x2, on one subcarrier, and their difference, x1 minus x2, on the other subcarrier. We could be using any mixing operation at all, as the receiver can reverse it. We just need to find one that minimizes the power variations in the transmitted signal. By including this operation, we arrive at a technique known as Single Carrier Frequency Division Multiple Access, or SC-FDMA, which is illustrated in this figure. In this diagram, there are three differences from OFDMA. The main difference is that the SC-FDMA transmitter includes an extra forward FFT between the steps of serial to parallel conversions and resource element mapping. This mixes the symbols together in the manner required to minimize the power variations, and is reversed by an inverse FFT in the receiver. The second difference arises because the technique is used in the uplink. Because of this, the mobile transmitter only uses the same of the subcarriers. The others are set to 0 and are available for the other mobiles in the cell. Finally, each mobile transmits using contiguous block of subcarriers without any internal gaps. This is implemented by the name SC-FDMA and is necessary to keep the power variations to the lowest possible level. We can understand how SC-FDMA works by looking at three key transmission steps: the forward FFT, the resource element mapper, and the inverse FFT. The forward FFT converts these symbols to the frequency domain. The resource element mapper shifts them to the desired center frequency, and the inverse FFT converts them back to the time domain. If we look at this step as a whole, we can see that the transmitted signals should be much the same as the original modulated waveform, except for a shift to another center frequency. Well, we have therefore achieved the result we required, of transmitting a signal with a ruggedly constant power. We don't use the SC-FDMA in the downlink because the base station has to transmit to several mobiles, not just one. We could add a single forward FFT across the whole of the downlink band, but unfortunately, that would spread every mobile's data across the whole of the frequency domain and would remove our ability to carry out frequency-dependent scheduling. Either way, SC-FDMA is unsuitable for the LTE downlink. Hello tech lovers, thanks for watching and don't forget to like and share the video. I'm launching one lesson per week, so it is important that you activate the bell to be notified when I upload a new video. Stay home, wash your hands and take care.